In this To Get You Started video, we'll be showing you how to create this panel layout using models from the Wildlife Scenes collection from Design&Make.com. If you're interested in purchasing the collection, please click the Wildlife Collection banner at the top left or the link in the description below. We hope that this is a helpful video to get you started. Okay, for this demonstration, we'll be using VCarve Pro version 8. It's important to remember that the tools that we'll be using for this demonstration are also available in VCarve Desktop and Aspire, so you can use this demonstration for both of those software packages as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new file, and this file is going to be true to life in that we are going to make the actual panel 30 inches tall so it can replace potentially a door, a covered door in a house. So the actual job size we're going to make, the width is going to be 20 inches and the height will be 32 inches. That gives us a little bit of wiggle room around our actual layout. The thickness of our material is going to be 0.75 inches. Our datum will be set to the center. Of course, we're going to use inches. We're going to use a very high resolution. That's important because this is a pretty big piece, so it's pretty substantial. And we're going to click OK. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our clip art tab, and we have all of the Wildlife Scenes collection installed. So if we slide down in our Design and Make folder, you'll see that we have Deep in the Wilds, the deer mantle, the duck panel, the elk scene, and the pheasant hunt. So we're going to use the panel from the Deep in the Wilds project. So we're going to go ahead and double click on the raised panel. Now, we're going to do this in a certain order. That way we know that everything fits properly and is all centered up. So if we double click on the raised panel first, VCarve Pro will pop it right into the center of our workspace. If then we double click on the raised panel, you'll see that it will pop it right in the center as well. So now they're lined up perfectly centered on top of each other, which looks great in the 2D view. But when we flip to the 3D view, nothing is really all that different. And that's because in VCarve Pro, when you bring in any of your models from your clip art folders, they come in as a merged component, which generally is perfect. But in this particular case, we're merging in a recessed panel into a raised panel, so you can't see the recess as well, or the recessed panel at all. So let's go to our modeling tab, and we're going to right click on our recessed panel. We're going to change the combine mode to add, and when we do that, now you can see that it looks proper. So let's go back to our 2D view just for a second, and we are going to go ahead and marquee select both of those. That's clicking in the top left hand corner and dragging that down, so we select both of those components, and we're going to go ahead and right click on those, and we're going to group those together. No, we're not going to group those together yet because we're not quite done sizing them up. Sorry about that. So let's reselect those, and we're going to press T on the keyboard, and we are going to scale up the height of this to be 30 inches. And because we have the link X and Y selected, then our width will be changed automatically with our height. And we're going to go and click apply, and we're going to press F on the keyboard to focus on our whole layout. We're going to close that down, and let's go ahead to our 3D view now. Now here we go. Now we're going to go ahead and do some work with this. We want to make sure that the base of our panel, when it is added, or recess, when it's added to our panel, the bottom of this is actually on the modeling plane. So anything we merge into our panel will actually rest. We'll get the best use of our shape height that we have. Okay, so let's just check to make sure that's okay. So let's triple click on the panel, and we're going to go ahead, and down at the bottom you'll see that we can bring up our floating properties dialog. So we're going to go ahead and slide that over here, and we're going to, seeing as we only have a 3/4 inch piece of material in here, we want to only use half of that for our actual carving, and we want to keep the extra 1/4 inch as a backing to thicken it up and make our door more rigid. So we're going to go ahead and change the shape height of this to 0.5, which is the maximum we want it to be. Click the space bar, and it will change, and VCarve Pro will change that for us. And then we're going to go ahead and double click on our actual recessed panel, and we're going to change that to be 0.5. Oh shoot, too many points in there. and then we'll click the spacebar. So now when we look at this, if we look straight down on this, and if you look down here, if we hover across our model, you'll see that the base of this, even though it shows that there is something there, is actually the Z height is 0. So that means it's at the very back. So we've actually, if we turn it up on our edge, then our back of this recessed panel actually lays perfectly on the modeling plane here. So anything that we merge into this will actually lay right on our modeling plane, which is perfect for what we want. Now what we're going to do is, because like the previous video that we did for the wildlife scenes collection, we want to actually create this so anything that we add into this or merge or add to it is always merged into this frame. Then we're going to create a new level for everything else. So let's go ahead and go to our modeling tab for a moment, and we're going to go ahead and rename this level panel. Okay, and then we're going to right click, and we are going to go ahead and insert in a new level, and we're going to call this, again, right click on that, rename it, and we're going to call it layout. And then we're going to drag the panel above the layout, and then we're going to make sure that this panel is actually, or this level is actually a merge level. So if I right click and I go combine mode and I select merge, then anything that I add on this level, the result of it will be merged into this panel, which is great. Or really, this panel will be merged into the result of whatever's down here. So now we're going to make sure that we have our layout level highlighted, and now we can start to work on that. So let's just go ahead and click on our clip art tab. And the first thing we're going to bring in is the mountain scene from the Deep in the Wild, and we're going to use that as one of the sort of highlights of the background of this. Holding down our shift key, we're going to grab this sizing handle and we're going to scale it up. And we just want to make sure that it tucks into, because it's going to be merged into the panel, it tucks into the actual size of the panel. So as you can see, I've sized it up just so that the green area is inside this flat area of my panel, and that looks great. And then we're going to go ahead and select it, and we are going to hold down our shift key and we're going to drag it in. And now again, as I do with all of these, I'm working very organically with this. So I'm just kind of guessing at where I want this to be. I know I want to have space up here to put in some text. And then I want to add some elements up top, and I want to have some elements in the bottom. So for right now, I think this is a pretty good spot to put that for right now. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to change the shape height to be a little bit more reflective of what we want. Right now it's taking up a lot of the depth that we have here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to change that to be 0.35. I'm just guessing at what this is, right? I'm putting in some whole numbers in there so it's easy to tell. And then we're going to close that down. And that looks pretty good. I'm still retaining the detail that I want, but it looks kind of nice. Now let's go ahead and grab some grass from the deer mantle. We're going to bring in our grass texture. And we're going to hold down our shift key and we're going to drag it down to here. And then we're going to go ahead and just stretch it up. And holding down the shift key, we're going to grab the side panel, and again we're going to make sure that it goes into the bevel a bit so it ends up merging in nicely. And we've got a nice sort of plane going on here. I do want to make it fade out a little bit more as it goes back. So in this case, I know I want it to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and use the fade function in the floating properties dialog. So I'm going to click that, and I'm going to set my 2 anchor points. I'm going to set one down here, and then I'm going to move my mouse straight up, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set my second one there. And I'm going to set my fade to be 100%. I want it to fade right back to nothing. And you'll see why in a second why I want to do that. Let's go ahead and close that. And now I want the transition between my grass and my mountains to be a little bit more, not so stark here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my mountains, and I'm going to go to my floating properties dialog again. I don't need to keep closing this down. It's just a habit of mine. So if you can remember not to click close, then you can leave it floating around here, and it actually will, depending on what component I have, it'll update properly here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit fade. I'm going to set again my 2 anchor points for my fade. One to be up here and one to be down here again. And it's going to be set to 100%. We're going to close that. Now again, in the end, I might come back and change the shape height a bit again here, but for right now, we're going to go with that. Now let's go ahead. Now, I want to add in some trees to my scene, so I'm going to go ahead and use the fir trees here. I'm going to double click on those and drag them in. I'm going to put one over here. Around there looks pretty good, and maybe I'll scale that up just a little bit, not much. And we can scoot it in a little bit, like that. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at our properties here, and we're going to go, that all looks great, perfect for now. And then we're going to hold down our control key and we're going to drag this across our layout. And when I hold down the control key, of course, and I drag a component, it's going to make a copy for me. Then I'm going to press H on the keyboard, and that's going to flip this component from left to right. And I'm going to go ahead and size it down a little bit because I want it to look like it's a different set of trees, not the same as the other one, just a subtle difference. That looks pretty nice there. We might move them around in the end again. I want to change my shape height here to be the same as what I had these trees at, which is around a quarter inch. So we'll make this a quarter inch. That's great. Let's close. And now I'm going to start to add in some animals to the foreground here. So we're going to grab my favorite deer, which is the deer number 1. Or double click on that, and we're going to move him down here. And what I want him to look like is he's right in the foreground. So I'm going to tuck his front hooves into the actual border of this panel and his tail into the left-hand side of the panel. I'm going to scale up this deer. Now there is a reason why I left this gap right here in the in our trees. Not only does it look natural, but also it leaves me a place to scale up my deer so that his head and his nose can be right around the center, not really the center, but can be in there somewhere. So again, I get the best use of my material thickness for the deer's head, because his snout is kind of the highest point of this model. And you'll see that I just tuck him in there nicely. Maybe scale him up a little bit. I want him to be quite pronounced. And then we're going to bring in a second deer, and we're going to tuck this little deer back here in the background a little bit, maybe somewhere around here, to give it again the perception of a little bit of or perceived depth to this. And that looks pretty good. Now we're going to need to do some work on making sure that we don't lose antlers and stuff into the actual mountain range and the trees match up properly. So let's go ahead and let's start with the deer in the background here. Bring up our floating properties dialog box, and we are going to go ahead and I don't mind the shape height. We're going to give him a bit of a base height here of 1. That should bring him out a little bit. That's not too bad. Let's zoom in just a little bit here. His antlers are stuck in the trees a bit there. And I still have lots of room left if I rotate my model up, because I have a ½ inch, right? So I still have a little bit more space. So let's give him a little bit more. That's going to max out my shape height. So I'm going to have to do a little work with my trees back here in a second, but that's no big deal. We can do that. Let's grab this deer, and we're going to do the same with him. So we're going to change him to be 0.45, and we're going to give him a base height of 0.5. And we're going to see what that 0.05, excuse me. Oh. Perfect. There we go. And that's going to pop his antlers out a bit where I want them to be. Not bad. Now, to do a couple things here. First of all, we can actually fix the tree problem we're having here by using a bit of a fade. So we're going to set our fade. Again, we're doing this very organically. I'm just kind of guessing at this. So we're going to go ahead and fade that in there. And that looks pretty decent. Our trees fade away. Our deer antlers for this front guy are actually proud of those trees. That looks great. Close that down. Again, a habit of mine to do that. I don't need to do that. Bring the properties dialog back up again. That's great. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and fix this deer. We're going to, and because of the nature of the mountains back here, we can actually kind of wiggle this deer around a little bit and see if we can find a better spot for his antlers to be. And we're going to have to just work on this a bit more. There we go. Now we got everybody happy. and we have a bit more space here now. So we can go ahead and change our fade for this a bit. Maybe we can minimize that a bit by making that 0.35. And that might actually help us a bit with that. Just a bit, yeah. We get more definition again that we kind of lost. So that looks good. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Now, one of the tricks again that we saw in the last video was that I used the cloud texture to make the grass look a little bit more organic. By making it look like there was some areas that maybe the deer had trampled down or had been standing around, or maybe some rocks kind of poking up through the grass. So we're going to go ahead and just grab cloud number 7 from the deer project, the deer mantle project, and we'll bring it down to underneath this deer's feet, size it up just a little bit, and we're going to see what we get when we mess around with our shape height a bit. So let's go ahead and bring up our floating properties dialog again, and we're going to change that to be maybe 0.15. That looks pretty good. It's kind of giving us a little bit of a rough look under that deer. And then we're going to make a copy of that somewhere over here by holding down our control key. Maybe we'll just hit H on the keyboard. Maybe we'll just kind of pull it up a little bit like that and maybe move it down a little bit. Then we'll click over there. There we go. So that gives it a little bit more of an organic look. And then I don't really like the way that these trees kind of end off with their with the stump kind of proud. So we're going to go ahead again, holding down our control key, and we'll copy over our cloud, and we're just going to make that look a little different. There we are. That's perfect. Now I'm going to do one more thing that I think is kind of interesting with these, where the mountains kind of come down and intersect with the grass. It's nice and smooth there, and it looks fine, and you could probably get away with this. But I think that if we bring in another different cloud in, let's bring in the cloud number 6 from deep in the wilds. We're actually going to lay that just at the base of the mountains. It'll kind of give it kind of a hazy, kind of foggy look. And obviously the shape height of that is way too high, so we're going to go ahead and change that to 1, maybe even less than that, 0.05. That's going to make it even thinner. Let's even go even less than that. This is just to kind of give it just a bit of a texture back there. There we go, and that looks kind of nice. Just a nice light texture back there. So I'm pretty happy with the way that looks at the bottom. Now let's go ahead and start to fill in the sky area. Again, with the sky, and I mentioned this before, we're going to add in some text up here that's going to be VCarved later. But there is some space up here that we can use for a little bit, add some interest to it, I guess. So let's just go ahead and drag. Let's go to our our duck panel. All of these come with some nice clouds. So let's grab the clouds from the duck panel. Let's move these up here. Then we're going to maybe put them over the top of the trees here, or not the trees, excuse me, the mountain range. And I'm going to go ahead and just flip that using the H on the keyboard. I want it to kind of come down to a little less stuff going here, because I'm going to actually put the name of the person who quoted the quote, if that makes any sense, right about there. That's great. Perfect. Let's go to the Deep in the Wilds project again, and we're going to bring in the sun moon. In this case, it's going to be the sun, and we're going to put it up here. I guess it could be a moon. This could be an evening scene. The deer might come out for a little bit of a evening snack. And we're going to go ahead and maybe we'll just grab the clouds from this particular project, cloud number 6, and we'll bring them up and float them over here, merge them into the, in behind the sun, which I know is kind of, isn't quite right, but it adds a bit of interest. Let's hit the H key again, because I like this end better of those clouds. And there we have it. So there's our layout. Now, the great thing about this layout, again, like I had mentioned, we're going to put some text in here, but the text that I choose may not be what you choose. Or maybe your customer might choose a different text, or different bunch of information in there. Maybe it's a person's name, or maybe this is a gift for a cottage or something. But and so maybe they want to put, our lovely home or whatever. But in this case, I went online and I found this quote, which is from Edward Abbey, who I'm really not sure who that is. Wilderness is not a luxury, but a necessity of the human spirit. And this is only a chunk of a full quote. So we're going to use the bit that I thought was interesting. So let's go to we're going to copy this whole thing. And we're going to go to our 2D view. We're going to go to our drawing tab. And we're going to choose our text to create text, and we're going to paste in that text. Now we're going to go ahead and we'll try this font. I'm not sure what it's going to do for us, but we'll see what it is. And we're going to put this into shorter sentences because it needs to fit in, or shorter lines. So we're going to go with wilderness as not. We're going to put a enter there. We'll delete that space. Luxury, but a same thing here. But a necessity of the human spirit, and we'll put human spirit on the last line all by itself, which will look kind of nice. And then Edward's name there. And we're going to center that. That was good and perfect. We'll hit apply, and we'll drag that up to where it needs to be. And then we can scale it up. Now when I scale it up, I'm going to scale it so that this text fits. I'm not too worried about Edward Abbey because I'm going to make it a bit smaller. That's not a bad font, but I think I want to change that. I want something with some serifs on it. Maybe we'll go with let's go with L. If I hit L on the keyboard while I'm in my actual font selector here, it'll take me right to the L's. Actually, I want to go to P. Sorry, my mistake. We're going to go with the Palantino linotype. Let's apply that. I like that a little bit better. The font is pretty bold, so when I VCarve it, it's going to look nice just on its own. And we're going to click close. That's great. So now that I have this text, I want to break it up a little bit because I need this line all by itself. So if this text is already selected, and if I right click on that and I go down to break text into lines, then VCarve Pro will break this text into lines, but it's still editable. So if I go back to my text here, I can go ahead and I can change this. So if I made a spelling error or whatever, I can go back and still select that. Where if I had gone and right clicked on it and said convert to curves, then I couldn't edit it anymore, although I could move bits of it around. But it's better if I break it into lines. Then I can go ahead and take his name, slide it over here, slide it down so it fits in there nicely, and we're going to go ahead and size that up. Now unfortunately in VCarve Pro I cannot model this, so the only way that I can show you what this text is going to look like on the finished layout is to actually do some tooling and preview that tooling. But for now what we can do is we can go to our 3D view. We're going to go to our view, and we're going to use our shadow shading, and we're going to go to view, and we're going to remove our drawing plane. So in the least we can see what it looks like. It's got a nice, I think it's a great looking layout. And now what I'll go ahead and do is, this is suitable now to send off to a customer for approval. So I could go up to view, save my shaded image as a PNG file, and I could email that off, ask my customer whether I would what text I'd like to put in here, and they could get back to me with the text. And then to show them what it's going to look like, then I would go ahead and preview some tooling for it. So in this case, I'm going to do up some basic tooling, and then when I come back, I'll show you the preview of that. Okay, so here's the result of my tooling that I'd done, only to show you what the V-carving would look like in the end. If you look at my tool paths that I've created, I only created 3. I didn't do a roughing pass, I just did a finishing pass, a V-carve tool path, and then a profile cut so I could get rid of the extra material, just as a preview to show you what it would look like in the end. So if I go ahead and zoom in here, the V-carving comes out quite nice for the text, which looks really good. All the detail comes out in the deer and the trees. The antlers are proud of the trees like we had planned. There's a little bit of fine texture back here to give a little bit of a mottled look. The ground looks really neat. So overall, I think it's a pretty decent layout. Anyway, I hope that helped. Some of the things that we did sort of cover in this is, of course, bringing in a selection of models from the different projects in the wildlife scenes collections, um, setting up the panel, using the raised panel and then using the raised panel recess, and how to use those two together. I showed you how to create some different levels, some tips and tricks on bringing in models, fading them and so on, making sure that your shape heights are good, and also fading if you need to fade things in behind to kind of make things look proper. Also, using the clouds, which again is a great technique for making the a texture look a little bit more organic. And in this case, it did a nice bit. Not only does it show a little bit of modeling below the deer's bodies, but also maybe even shows a little bit of a shadow from where the sun is creating a shadow underneath the animals. So overall, I think it looks like a pretty good piece. I hope that this video was helpful and it was enough to get you started. Important note, if you plan to create tooling and run it on your CNC, make sure that you use values for the material setup and for the parameters of each toolpath that are safe and appropriate for your CNC machine, the tooling you have available, and whatever material you are planning to use for your project.